This is John Catorna back again for part 2 of the CHEP Iberia presentation. I hope you enjoyed the first part where we looked at particularly how we should restructure our marketplace, understand the linkages with our customers, develop corresponding value propositions, and then move to understand how we're going to implement that through reshaping the culture inside the business, and of course to do that we need the appropriate leadership. So this particular presentation, short video, is about that second part where we're looking at how we shape the different subcultures inside the business and why that's important, and why having the leadership, the right sort of leadership at a particular point in time in an organisation is so important. This area of culture is a very vexed one, particularly when it comes to looking at how we implement things. One of the reasons we've had so many failures in our corporations over the years in trying to implement strategy is because people have sat around in meetings listening to their bosses and nodding their heads when the bosses have been saying, well, we're going to do this, this and this, but deep down they've been saying no, no, no. So there's a lot of passive resistance inside organisations if people have been asked to do things which don't necessarily line up with their own particular values. Culture in an organisation comes from different things. As the organisation grows, people join it. Each person that comes into an organisation brings with them their little microcosm of values. There's the tradition inside the business, and so over time, with the KPIs and all sorts of things, it shapes the values and beliefs of that particular organisation. And eventually, if the organisation's been running long enough, particularly the old bricks and mortar companies, then those values and beliefs sort of, if you like, sink down and become the deeply held underlying assumptions about the way this business is run. And that's a problem when you want to change things, because once you've got values and beliefs that are effectively set in concrete, it's very difficult to change them. And it's one of the reasons why, as we look around the world, some of the best companies with the best supply chains today are only companies that did not exist 30 years ago. Companies like Dell and Apple and others, Cisco, they didn't have this disadvantage of having to unravel their legacy cultures in order to make changes, whereas the older bricks and mortar companies that have been around for 50 or 100 years have great difficulty in undoing that culture, which may have been driving success some time ago, but which needs to change in the new environmental conditions. So when we look at culture, we break it up according to our model into 4 different subcultures. Every business has 4 different subcultures. They've got the subculture of what I'd call innovation and complexity, flexibility. The opposite of that is the culture of hierarchy and stability and systems, and the two of those are in a type of dynamic tension. Then there's the culture of speed and activity and urgency versus the opposite of that, which is the culture of relationship and cohesion. And these 2 different pairs of subcultures are in, as I say, a dynamic tension. And the question is, where is the centre of gravity in a particular organisation? Because where you have the dominant culture will tend to determine the way the organisation behaves. So, for instance, if the centre of gravity is very much in this area of hierarchy and stability and order, that will tend to be the culture that will be the one that will dominate. Even though you may have pockets of innovation or pockets of agility or pockets of relationship, it's very difficult for those other subcultures to maintain their existence if they're overshadowed by this big subculture. So that's part of the problem, and one of the challenges that modern management has is that if we recognise in our marketplace that we've got 3 or 4 different buying behaviours, what that implies is that we need 3 or 4 matching subcultures in our business. And even though those subcultures can be opposite, they must be managed in a way and kept separate so they don't kill each other. And this requires very careful management in order to underpin and drive and successfully drive those strategies into the particular markets. The point is that how do we actually create these subcultures? And there's no secret about this. The different levers, I've identified about 13 different levers. There's organisation design, there's the way we position our people inside the business, the processes we use, the particular combination of IT systems, how we use S&OP, sales and operations planning, the sorts of KPIs we use, the incentives we have in our business, the job designs, internal communications, the way we communicate internally, training and development initiatives, role modelling, recruitment and leadership. There's something like 13. And the difficult bit is, how do you combine those 13 levers in different ways in order to get the culture or the subculture you're looking for? For instance, if you want a subculture of collaboration, if you've got a collaborative segment that you're trying to deal with and you're driving a continuous replenishment supply chain, then the way you look at organisation design there is that, for instance, you would set up multidisciplinary clusters to one side where you would second people out of production and logistics and sales and marketing and put them in a group, give them a joint KPI and focus them on particular customers who are collaborative. Maybe a single customer, maybe a group of customers. Companies like Li and Fung do this very successfully. You still need your verticals because that's where your specialisms are. But those specialisms are pointed vertically and can't easily give you the horizontal solution and drive the supply chains horizontally. Of course, you can genetically engineer your people as well, put the right sorts of people, put people in there that on balance have a relationship bias. Not that everyone needs to do that, but you sort of need that net bias in that particular group. You'll look at processes. In this case, you might have standard processes like customer account management. You might use technology where you'd feature a CRM, customer relationship management system, sitting on top of your ERP. Your sales and operations planning would be quite standard, where people would come together and debate what would be the forecast that you're going to follow. The KPIs would be simple things like retaining the customer or penetrating the customer's spend a bit more than before. These sorts of things, is what you do if you had a collaborative customer. If you had transactional customers where your lean supply chain was the one that you were trying to build, then all the same levers would be used, but the answers would be different. For instance, on the organisational design side, you might have a number of clusters of people to one side, but one cluster would look after sourcing, one cluster would look after the order management process, another cluster would look after fulfillment, and they'd all come together to give you the best result for the customer, which would be a standard, reliable, consistent delivery at the lowest possible cost. And you would position people inside those clusters, so you would get a bias for cost and cost control. Processes, as I said, would be standard. The IT systems would be pretty standard, legacy ERP systems. S&OP would be pretty standard. The KPIs, though, would be different. Here you'd be focusing much more on delivery in full on time and less on retention of customers. And you'd look at things like forecast accuracy as well. As you move to the dynamic customer segment, where you're looking at the agile supply chain, again, using the same levers, we'd have some different responses. We'd cluster people and put a bias of speed in. We'd position people who are prepared to take risk and take decisions quickly. We would have fewer processes and more emphasis on the results, and our IT systems would be things like supply chain planning, network optimization, things like that. So the point I'm making is, and we could go on and on here, is that there are very definite ways that you can create or shape the subcultures inside the business in a conscious way in order to align up with the sorts of market segments you've got, and therefore be more successful in the way you drive your supply chain strategies into the marketplace. But of course, to do that, you need good leadership. And what I've found in my research is that inevitably those organisations which have or enjoy sustained success are generally those where the top team seem to have a great empathy for the marketplace. They understand the marketplace, so if you can get a top team that understands their marketplace, then it's generally going to be the case they'll develop appropriate strategies, and they'll also develop the appropriate organisation designs and subcultures that sit underneath those particular value propositions. So here again we have 4 different types of classic leadership style. We've got the visionary, who's a risk taker and leads by inspiration, and the opposite of that is much more the traditionalist, who is leads by procedure. We've also got the company baron that's driven by objectives, versus the coach, who is much more looking at relationships. So, and you can have combinations of those, and right. And we use the Myers-Briggs type indicator as the instrument to work out what preferences individual leaders have, and then we convert that into what we call our PADI coding system, which allows us then to match up with the external world to see that we're putting together groups inside the business which are the same as those outside. So having said all that, I've really concentrated so far in both these videos on the front end, and I've done that quite consciously, because unless we understand that front end and understand how we service customers, then we're not going to do very well as we look out the back end to our suppliers. But the same thing applies, and virtually the supply side of the alignment is a mirror image of the front end. And here again, I think it's an area that's been neglected. I think procurement people have been left to their own devices. They've not been linked in very well with the front end, and so consequently we've seen procurement people go off and do segmentation around the product characteristics they're buying, which is just the wrong way to do it. What I'm arguing is that we should do the same sort of behavioural segmentation on our supply base that we did on our customer base. And what we're going to find, surprise, surprise, is that the same sort of pattern, that there'll be suppliers there who are reliable and trusted. There'll be suppliers there who will be much more process driven. There'll be suppliers who are better, have got capacity, who can respond quickly to us, and there'll be suppliers who, from time to time, we can call upon to come up with innovation and innovative solutions at speed. So again, what I'm arguing is that by understanding our supply base in a behavioural sense, we will be able to more finely attune and select those suppliers which are appropriate for the sorts of things that we're trying to do at the front end of the business. So if you can imagine, we've got 3 or 4 behavioural segments at the front end, 3 or 4 behavioural segments at the back end. There's a potential for up to 15 or 16 different combinations of pathways from our supply base through to our customer base. Now, of course, there's only 3 or 4 or 5 of those that are the main ones, but there's others that from time to time, pathways which could be used. And in my book, hopefully if you get a chance to look at it, I've written a whole chapter there where I've given examples of all 16 different combinations. So there you have it. What we've really been talking about in these 2 videos is resolving complexity. And you can't resolve complexity from the inside out. You have to go to the outside, look at your marketplace, look at your supply base, resolve what's going on in those places, and then inform the way you design your network inside your business or inside your company's network from both sides. And if you do that, you'll find that you'll take a lot of the complexity out of your business. You'll more finely tune with your customers and your suppliers. What will happen there is your cost to serve will go down, and also your customer service levels and satisfaction levels will go up, and consequently you'll find areas of increased margin in your business that you'll be able to sustain on an ongoing basis. So I hope that gives you some ideas for your ongoing discussions in this particular workshop.